Good morning, students. We've been looking at the chapter of changing traditions, and where we discussed that we first started with the society of you even cannot call that a society. We started as being hunters and gatherers, and then gradually became part of much more complex societies, whether they were the social or the economic. And gradually now, by 13th, 14th, and 15th century, we reached a stage whereby people had started, the navigators, the sailors, they started venturing into different parts of the planet Earth because they wanted to discover more and more profitable trading routes. They wanted to see the world, and naturally, uh, they wanted to sell items which other societies did not have. The other societies wanted to buy the items that they did not have. They wanted to sell their own items, and so there was trading was hugely responsible for opening up of the world, where it gave an impetus and it gave an incentive and motivation for the people to reach the far-flung areas of planet Earth. And that is what we saw, that yes, Mediterranean emerged as a very important trading point, because some of the great sailors and some of the great trading centers were in the areas around, in the areas around Italy and Constantinople, and all these areas were the hub of economic activity. And this photograph is the palace of Doji. And the Palace of Doji happens to be, it's interesting to know that this was a palace actually which represented the affluence of the Venetian society, because Venice at that point used to be very, very early, much before London and Paris and Berlin ever came into prominence. It was Venice which came to be known as the richest of the rich people of Europe used to live in Venice. And this palace which you see here happens to be the Palace of Doge, and it used to be as a mark or a logo of the prosperity of Venice, because it used to be the palace of the Duke of Venice, okay, and which used to look into the Adriatic Sea. The blue waters that you see right in front of it is the water of Adriatic Sea. Okay, so the opportunities for commercial expansion coincided with changing attitudes concerning the value of life, respect for human beings, uh, that marked much of Islamic art and literature. An example of Greek art and ideas that came to Europe from Byzantine trade encouraged Europeans to take a new look at the world. And from the 14th century, in what is called the Renaissance, especially in North Italian towns, the wealthy became less concerned with life after death and more with the wonders of life itself. Sculptors, painters, and writers became interested in humanity and the discovery of the world. As we saw yesterday, if you remember, we had studied that there was no middle class as such. People were either uh, fabulously rich traders and aristocrats, and the other segment of the society was just about comprising of the poor people. And what they were mainly interested was, and of course, there was church and clergy, and what they were interested was just to ensure that life, no one was now interested in improving the quality of life of people, because it was considered to be a very difficult task to do that. That is first thing. And the second thing was that the ruling class at that point in time, there was the government, if you can call it in today's modern terms of government. The government was not about the welfare of the people and about raising the quality of life of the people. It was not, the governments used were never that accountable like what they are today. So in those years, everything was managed by the rich people of the cream of the society. So naturally, they were more concerned about their own welfare rather than the welfare of the common people. But all that gradually started changing during the period of Renaissance, whereby people started, um, paying attention to many, many different areas which otherwise they had always ignored. Things like astronomy, mathematics, art, sculpture. Great writers came up who used to write now about a lot of things which were not just historical writings as such, whereby this king attacked this king and this king was a winner of this battle and that war. No, a lot of things now started being written. A lot of areas which otherwise went unexplored, now people started writing about their own traveling journeys, because as I just mentioned, people, the traders, the diplomats, they started moving into different parts of the world, trying to develop and forge relationships with the different empires, different civilizations, different kingdoms. So people started even writing about their own experiences. So naturally, the whole world was opening up, and European travelers, as no, sorry, by the end of the 15th century, this state of affairs encouraged travel and discovery as never before. Voyages of discovery took place. Spaniards and Portuguese who had traded with North Africa pushed further down the coast of Western Africa, finally leading to journeys around the Cape of Good Hope to India. Guys, Cape of Good Hope, guys, I really wish I could have shown you on the board. The old route of which the Europeans used to take to come to India, right? And the how the new naval routes came and evolved, about how the people started coming to India and people had started going to China, because India and China were, control half of the global trade at that point in time. Yes, today we constitute only about 4 to 5% of the global trade, unfortunately, but there was a time when we were enormously prosperous economy, and we really, if I want to go into the details of it, we controlled almost 24% of the global GDP. So it is, yes, that's what we once were. So Columbus attempted to find a western route to India, and in 1492 reached the islands which the Europeans called the West Indies. Other explorers tried to find a northern route to India and China via the Arctic. Now you have to understand, again, I wish I had a boat. You have to understand that if you want to reach India, then today you come through the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, and then finally you enter into the Arabian Sea, and then that's how you reach the port of Bombay, right? But at that point in time, because these are warm waters, and but it is difficult, but at that point in time there were a lot of European travelers who felt, especially the European travelers, naturally Europe is very close to North Pole, right? Germany, France, these areas, England, they are very close to North Pole. So that is why they thought that if they could find a shorter route which goes through the via the North Pole, that is Arctic, and then reach the country of China, right? Because China, as I said, happened to be China, India. Those countries used to be the main trading centers, the manufacturing centers of the world, right? So the explorers even wanted to find out those naval routes if that was possible for them, right? So European travelers encouraged a range of different people in the course of their journeys. In part, they were interested in learning from them. The papacy encouraged the work of the North African geographer and traveler Hassan al-Wazan, later known in Europe as Leo Africanus, who wrote the first geography of Africa in the early 16th century for Pope Leo X. Jesuit churchmen observed and wrote on Japan in the 16th century. So what we are now looking at, that the church and even the rich traders, they started patronizing a lot of different other activities which had nothing to do with the trading as such, like people exploring different places. Now you have to understand, students, that all that kind of exploration, shipping and all that needs money. Now at that point in time, the people, it was the businessmen and the traders who had all that kind of money. And then of course the church had enormous amount of resources at its disposal. Okay, so they were the ones who were now patronizing different kind of activities, right from art to literature to architecture. Some of the best churches that were made during the time of Renaissance, and the best paintings during the time of Renaissance, all of that was patronized by the popes at that point in time, and the richest of the bankers at that point in time. Okay, so that's what it was. That's how the world was moving around. And in their encounters, Europeans were sometimes cautious, self effacing, and observant, even as they frequently attempted to establish trade monopolies and enforce their authority by force of arms, as the Portuguese attempted to do it in the Indian Ocean after Vasco da Gama's arrival in Calicut, that is present today Kozhikode, in 1498. In other cases, they were overbearing, aggressive, and cruel, and adopted an attitude of superiority to those they met, considering such people as ignorant. The Catholic Church encouraged both attitudes. The Church was the center of the study of other cultures and languages, but also encouraged attack on people it saw as unchristian. You would read this in great detail in a few chapters from now. I think about two, after two chapters, or probably even one chapter, we would be looking at the colonization of Americas, especially the Latin American countries, by Portuguese and the Spaniard people. And that's where we would learn that how brutally the people of the Latin American people were colonized by the Europeans, first entering as traders, and then first winning their confidence, and then uh, unleashing all that brutality and torture and death upon the people of Latin America, and finally colonizing them. We shall look into, there is a separate chapter on this, and we shall study. Now, from the point of view of non-Europeans, the encounter with Europe varied. For much of the Islamic lands in India and China, though, Europeans remained a curiosity until the end of the 17th century. They were perceived as hardy traders and seamen who had little to contribute to their sense of the larger world. The Japanese learned some of the advantages of European technology quickly. For instance, they had begun large scale production of muskets by the late 16th century. Guys, muskets are the guns, the long guns, yes. In the Americas, enemies of Aztec Empire sometimes used Europeans to challenge the power of the Aztecs. At the same time, the diseases the Europeans brought devastated the population, leading to the death of over 90% of the people in certain areas by the end of 16th century. What they are talking about here in all this exposure was not just about exploration and making money and trading and all the good things and all the good things and all the good things. There was a flip side to it as well, whereby the European traders, they started entering into different geographies, different lands, but along with them they brought their own diseases, which was unheard of, which these new undiscovered areas and the land and the people, they never knew about such diseases because they never suffered from those diseases. It is the European travelers who brought their own unique diseases and started inflicting the newly discovered population and lands, and created havoc where hundreds and thousands died because of these diseases. These people, the new people, had no idea how to fight these diseases, and they succumbed to it. We shall be starting the chapter officially tomorrow, the three orders. Thank you.